Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a journey that is deeply introspective. We're going to explore what happens when a standard travelogue through Egypt transforms into a profound, life-altering quest for spiritual identity and heritage. We're tracing the path of what we're calling the transcendental tourist. This is a physical trip that is, at its absolute core, a search for faith, history, and family. It's a journey bound together by 4 distinct acts, and as you'll see, it really shows us how walking the ancient world can ultimately uncover your own soul.
So to kick things off, I want you to imagine hopping onto a tour bus, but you aren't just there to snap photos of ancient ruins. You're actually there to solve a lifelong mystery about yourself, specifically why you were given the name Aniano. For 50 whole years, our narrator carried around this incredibly unusual, somewhat antiquated name. And honestly, it felt like a burden. It was the kind of name that practically invited teasing on the playground, right? So he masked it. He just went by the nickname AJ. But as he embarks on this Holy Land tour starting right in Egypt, the whole trip totally morphs into this globe-trotting detective story to uncover the real, profound origins of his own identity.
Now, you might recognize these lyrics. The narrator actually uses this classic 80s pop song by Mr. Mister as the soundtrack to his journey, and it works perfectly. It beautifully blends the very secular act of traveling with a deeply spiritual awakening. I mean, the lyrics capture the exact essence of a traveler setting their feet on an unknown road, carrying the heavy weight of memories, and really searching for their soul. It's just a pop song, sure, but it carries a weight that mirrors the narrator's search for meaning perfectly.
And the reason that specific song hits the nail on the head is the phrase itself. Kyrie eleison is Greek, and it translates to Lord, have mercy. It's this incredibly simple prayer of desperation, of faith, and ultimately of transformation. It sets the tone for the entire trip. In fact, it serves as the absolute anchor for our very first stop.
Act 1. The Faith That Moves Mountains. Finding Miracles in Cairo's Garbage City.
We start our physical journey right at the dusty outskirts of Cairo. The narrator navigates through this massive urban slum to find a literal monument to mustard seed faith. The story goes that back in 979 CE, during a really high-stakes religious debate, a Coptic pope was challenged to prove the biblical promise that faith could move mountains. So, seeking the help of a famously pious one-eyed cobbler named Saint Simon the Tanner, the pope cried out, Kyrie eleison 3 times. And tradition says that an actual earthquake physically shifted Mokata Mountain eastward. Today, if you go there, nestled deep within that exact rock face, right above a community of garbage collectors known as the Zabaleen, sits the Cave Cathedral. It's the largest church in the Middle East, carved directly out of the stone. Talk about a stunning starting point for a pilgrimage.
Act 2. Quarantine in the Wilderness. Tracing the Exodus through the Sinai Peninsula.
Leaving the bustling city behind, the narrator crosses from Africa into Asia through the Ahmed Hamdi Tunnel, stepping into the totally arid desolation of the Sinai Peninsula. And here, we get this brilliantly witty juxtaposition. The narrator is super self-aware about the sheer contrast between the brutal, multi-generational exodus of the ancient Israelites and his own, let's face it, highly pampered modern pilgrimage. Think about it. The ancients endured 40 years of wandering, drinking bitter waters, relying on manna from heaven, and facing incredibly harsh spiritual testing. Meanwhile, our narrator is knocking the whole thing out in 2 days on a crisp, air-conditioned tourist bus, clutching free bottled water and loading up a plate at a halal buffet at a desert resort. It's a funny but profound realization of how the landscape is just as ancient and barren as ever, even if the way we travel through it has completely changed.
But following these physical waypoints, we can really start to track the spiritual progression of his journey. They cross the very spot where the Red Sea parted, which is now near the Suez Canal. They roll past Ayun Musa, the famous bitter wells that were turned sweet. They cut right through the gorgeous multicolored striations of the Desert of Sin, hitting Wadi Pharaon where ancient battles were fought. And all of this is leading directly toward the ultimate destination, Mount Sinai. The physical geography here perfectly mirrors that massive spiritual progression from slavery into revelation.
Now, a crucial point of this section is the number 40. In this wilderness, 40 represents the years the Israelites were quarantined, yes, but it's also this sacred, recurring metric of spiritual testing and isolation that has to happen before true transformation. Moses fasted for 40 days, Jesus fasted for 40 days. For the ancient Israelites, it was literally generational border control. The old mindset absolutely had to die out in the wilderness before the new generation could cross over into the promised land. And right here, tracing those ancient steps, our narrator reflects on his own 50 years of life, stepping into his own quiet space of reflection.
Act 3. The Ascent and the Summit. A physical struggle and a spiritual peak.
Okay, so
So it's time to leave the comfort of that air-conditioned bus. To tackle Jabal Musa, the mountain of God, the physical exhaustion really starts to strip away all those worldly distractions. Step 1, taking a massive leap of faith by trusting this wobbly camel that honestly seems to walk on complete autopilot right along the terrifying drop-offs of the Sikhet El Bashite Trail. Step 2 offers a brief, desperately needed moment of respite at a high-altitude base camp, which is basically an oasis tea house shared by tired travelers and mountain cats. And finally, Step 3. This is the treacherous, jagged ascent on foot. He's guided by a Bedouin man named Salam, whose enthusiastic encouragement in broken Tagalog literally pushes the narrator upward into the thin, freezing desert air.
750. That is the exact number of daunting, rock-hewn steps our narrator had to conquer on his own 2 feet to reach the 2,285-meter summit. It is a lung-burning, leg-shaking push, but with his guide Salam's help, he actually reaches the top just in time to watch the sunset paint these incredible pastels all across the crumpled canvas of the desert below.
Reaching that summit, the physical outer journey pauses for a deeply emotional internal realization. Right near the Cave of Moses, which is where the 10 Commandments were said to be received, the narrator's sister pauses to pray. She calls out the names of their ancestors into the howling wind, completely bridging the gap between ancient history and their own personal family tree. You know, in the Old Testament, only Moses was allowed to tread here, but now they stand on this summit, bringing the spirits of their family with them. It utterly transforms this barren peak into a profound space of grace. And this part gets me every time. In a truly profound moment of connection, the narrator leaves his grandfather's metal identity tag right there on the mountain. His grandfather, Lolo Pedro, was actually a Baptist minister who never had the chance to physically visit the Holy Land himself. So by placing this dog tag on Mount Sinai, the narrator is fulfilling a massive generational dream. It's this quiet, beautiful symbol of carrying a legacy of faith forward and finally bringing his grandfather to the Promised Land.
Act 4. The Revelation. Unlocking the 50-year-old mystery in Coptic Cairo.
The pilgrimage loops all the way back to the beginning now, returning to Old Cairo. And it's here that the physical landmarks finally unlock the narrator's internal mystery. These historic sites beautifully illustrate how Egypt was transformed over time, from an Old Testament land of oppression into a New Testament place of sanctuary and redemption. The narrator explores the Babylon fortress, the breathtaking hanging church that's literally suspended over an ancient Roman gate, and Abu Sirga, an underground cavern church built on the exact spot where the Holy Family is said to have hid from King Herod. Egypt wasn't just a place to escape from anymore. It became a place of total refuge. And it's right here, standing among these ancient stones, that a tour guide drops a casual piece of trivia that changes absolutely everything. Here is the grand revelation. The tour guide casually mentions the very first Coptic Christian convert in all of Egypt, and his name? Anianos, or in Greek, Anianos. In a single moment, the narrator discovers that his highly unusual name, Anianos, the very name he was mocked for as a kid, the name he tried so hard to hide, is directly tied to the absolute foundation of Christianity in Egypt. It translates to pang of distress.
And the way this specific history unfolds is just incredible. It's like a spiritual butterfly effect. The Apostle Mark is walking in Alexandria when his sandal tears. He takes it to a local cobbler named Anianos. While fixing it, Anianos accidentally slips and severely injures his finger with an awl. St. Mark miraculously heals the injury right then and there using just dust and spit. This miracle immediately leads to Anianos' conversion, and he eventually goes on to become the second patriarch of Alexandria. For our narrator, learning this story turns a name he once viewed as a heavy burden into a deeply celebrated spiritual legacy. It was an inheritance he simply never fully understood until he came and walked this ground.
Ultimately, what began as just a tourist's curiosity ends with this incredibly powerful realization of heritage, perfectly captured by this verse from Isaiah. The narrator literally traveled across continents to find out that the answer to his identity was carried with him the entire time, embedded in the very name he was given at birth. It's an amazing journey, and it really leaves us to ask, what forgotten histories, what profound legacies might be hiding inside your own name?